Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Jason's Take On. We will be talking about aligning sales and customer success. My name is Jason Whitehead, and my co-host Jason Noble is with me today. Just a couple quick things to kick this off. For those of you who have not joined us before, this is a new series that we're doing with topics on customer success every month or so. And the reason we started this series is we found that both Jason and I are very passionate about customer success, and we've had a lot of conversations, and there's a lot of value to be had for the business. And we really think that this is just our chance to give back and share some of our thoughts and excitement, and also answer some of the questions that people have and share some ideas that we've been hearing from around the industry. So we're very excited to have you join us, and we hope that you'll join us again. And one of the things we want to leave with is, as customer success is moving forward, and as we've seen all the excitement there is in the industry, there's also a lot of hesitation too. And people are not quite sure what to do, and organizations are still holding back a little bit in the field. So we want to encourage everyone to go out and be bold and really be aggressive in making customer success deliver on the promise that it can. So we encourage you to be bold, and we hope that through this series, we'll give you some ideas to how you might be able to do that. So that's a little bit about the series. To let you know just a little bit about my background, for those who don't know me, I'm the CEO of Tritons. I've been working in customer success and software adoption training consulting for, almost 20 years now. I've been with Tritons for over 12 years. I'm really excited to be here, having worked with a lot of organizations and met a lot of great people in the industry. And with that, I'll turn this over to Jason Noble so that he can do his intro.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. I'm the other Jason, Jason Noble. Scarily very similar to Jason. I've spent the last 20 plus years helping organizations across multiple industry sectors, looking at financial services, retail, e-commerce, public sector, digital media, technology, and more. And really the whole premise is to help them be more customer-centric. What does it mean, and how do we help them aspire to be more customer-centric, and with changing business models, changing customer expectations, deliver what customers ultimately want. I've held executive leadership positions in pretty much all of the post-sales customer-focused roles, including customer success, customer support, service delivery, account management, and project management. I've done it with a number of major global brands, including Sony, SunGard, and Reed Elsevier, and then also with a number of niche technology startups. And in all of them, I've come in and helped successfully build and lead their global customer success programs and operations and functions. I'm really excited to be here. As Jason said, really excited to be giving back, talking through some of our own learnings, really having this nice fireside chat where we'll talk through a few questions and give you our take on it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jason. Well, before we jump in, Jason, I wanted to throw a question out to everyone out there, and I want you to think about this throughout the webinar. What bold single action will you take to power up the alignment in your organization between sales and customer success? So give some thought to that question of what you think you'll be able to do to take bold action after this webinar going forward to help with alignment. And we'd love it if you would share in the comments as we go through the webinar or towards the end, any commitments that you're making, any thoughts that you have, and maybe we'll anonymously share some of those ideas out to help others get some ideas of what they could do in their organization. So give some thought to that as we go through, and let's jump right in. Jason, I'm going to start off with you, I guess. Why is alignment so important? Why are we even talking about this?
Yeah, great question to start with. And I love the idea of getting everyone here to come back and put in what they're going to be bold, because as you said at the beginning, that's really our whole premise here as to what can you do differently. I think that there's a number of key things here, and you and I spoke this week and last week about this, Jason, is that first of all, business models have fundamentally shifted. The sale is no longer just about that first transaction. A sale is about an ongoing relationship that we want to last for multiple years. And in effect, when you come up to renewals, every single renewal is a sale. And we need everybody to think about it. We need customer success and sales to be so aligned that we can resell the service, the technology year on year on year. I think it's really important to try and change the conversation. There's a lot of talk about in organizations who owns the customer. No one really does. It's the customer owns the customer. Your business is providing your services to the customer. Sales don't own the customer. Customer success don't. It's not just about landing the deal. It's about how do you get the customer to want to stay with you and retain business with you. So how do you want them to Renew 1 year in the future, renew few years in the future. And you've got to shift from the idea of it just being a single sale. I think that's one of the biggest things now. You know, both you and I, Jason, have come from kind of the on-prem world where we've sold and worked with licenses on customer sales. And quite often the sales guys do disappear. They're still there, but they're working on the next big deals. It's shifted massively now. When you're looking at a renewal, what you want everyone to start doing is thinking in, we talked about a 5-year sales effort. What can you do from that first engagement to get the customer to renew next year, the next year, and think that your renewal is a sale? And this is why I think you see challenges for some CS folk coming into it, that it isn't just about the operational, the trust, the relationship side. There is a commercial side to customer success, and we're going to do another webinar on the whole financial side of it. But the renewal is a sale, and you need the customer success team to be involved in that and work with sales to think about that. What we want sales to sell is not just for new logos, but sell for renewals and help them do that. And I think we talked about this the other day, but it's the idea of sales not being an event. It's not a one-off, but think of it as a chain. The sales part of it is so critical. It's that start of the relationship. It's not a transaction. When you're starting those engagements with your customers, how do you get them or how do you get you guys rather to be their ideal vendor? There's a lot of talk, and we've talked before about the ideal customer profile, but for our customers, they've got an ideal vendor profile. But we want the sales guys to understand what is it our customers are looking for. How do they start that conversation about building the relationships? And really, I think the key message is we've got to start thinking longer term, got to shift that focus from being about these quarter's figures, next quarter's figures. How do you get people thinking about do the sale so that they will renew in a year's time, do the sale that they will renew in 2 years' time? So get sales to think longer and try and get customer success on the flip side to think shorter term. How do you get everything up and running and delivering as quickly as we can for the customer? Any other thing to add on that, Jason?
Yeah, I think you really hit on it too, because the idea of selling for a sales chain too. I think historically there's been a lot of, especially like with CRM and major systems, where frankly people oversold the initial sell, and they set a bad expectation of licenses that were things that were never used, that sat on the shelf and never got used, and then back then, if you were just buying maintenance revenue, okay, you're stuck with them. But now, if you oversell to begin with, that really tarnishes the relationship and hurts your ability to want to do more business with the vendor in the future. So making sure that sales is really hitting the market is going to be a pretty key thing.
Absolutely. I think that brings us on to the next great question is what do you see as the major challenges with the lack of alignment? What problems does it cause us, Jason?
I some of this, I think, is chicken and the egg too, what we talked about. I think, one of the issues is there's so many silos, and the people so often stay in their own lane, and they've been very effective, and they've been managed and rewarded in a way that encouraged them to do that. So, for a lot of organizations of which I've experienced, as long as sales was closing the deal, they can get away with a lot of stuff. But now if they're closing the initial deal, but losing on a renewal, that sort of raises the question of where do we need to get to there? And I think one of the things that we're definitely finding here is that the challenge of misalignment and siloed behavior, before a lot of organizations could get away with it because initially it was a single sales transaction mindset. And now with the renewal mindset and the renewal reality, you really can't get away with misalignment anymore. And I think a lot of organizations are struggling with feeling the pain internally of, we're still focused on initial sales and new logos, like we talked about, and they're realizing that they can't just do nothing anymore, because otherwise it really is going to hurt them on the back end, and their investors, their evaluations, their softwares are going to be very concerned about it, and as are their customers as well too. So I think that's definitely a challenge. And looking at even the mindset and skill shift that may be required, does it take a different kind of person to be a subscription salesperson? Is it a different skill to be able to sell with the long-term view with that idea of a sales chain? How is it different than traditional sales? How is it different than what may have been done in the past? And I think, we talk so much about the business model evolving and the need for customer success, but I think many organizations are slow to wake up, and maybe even still haven't woke up to the idea that the manner in which we sell and the value proposition in which we sell really needs to change. and trying to get sales guys into new sales in a way that will drive future renewals and will drive their success. It's going to be pretty key. And Jason, we also talked a little bit about does compensation really reward success? And are we looking at commission structures and reward systems, for sales folks, but also for the customer success team that really gets everyone aligned to make sure that you're focused on relationships, focusing on customer outcomes, and at long-term rewards. And maybe there's some sort of blended compensation plan that needs to be developed here going forward. And perhaps one portion needs to be looked at, has the deal closed and more effective handoffs done and approved by the customer success team that says, yes, the way in which the sale was conducted and the way it was handed off set us up for success, set the customer up for success, and set up our organization to receive this renewal. And perhaps a portion needs to be focused on adoption and outcomes by the customer. So not just rewarding a salesperson or a sales team for closing a sale, but actually reward them when the customer creates value and adopts it, and have some metrics there, because that's what's going to land to the value that will get that customer to renew year over year over year. If that's what we want, why shouldn't we compensate the entire team, but especially the sales team, and for getting us there? And then obviously, if so many organizations looking for that expansion and renewal revenue, maybe those need to be factored into the compensation model. So I think there's a lot of moving parts there that so far have been challenges, because a lot of those things aren't there yet, and people are still holding on to the old ways of working and incentivizing. And Jason, I think you really hit the nail on the head, taking that longer term view, where I think executives and investors, they're so focused on short term, quarter by quarter, that they're hoping for A while rewarding B, and I think that's a real challenge for a lot of folks.
I think the thing that you're saying there, Jason, about the compensation model is key, because it is. If you look at, I think still the majority of technology organizations, even ones in subscription, compensation, particularly for sales guys, is commission and on deals. I really like the idea you've got about spreading it over a period, and I think it changes the way that compensation and reward works for the sales guys. I really like that, and I think there's a lot of benefit for the sales guys that they were actually rewarding long-term value. If they, instead of getting commission just on that first deal, imagine they get commission every single time that customer renews. That's really compelling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one other thing we didn't talk about, but I think is also a factor here, is when we look at the tenure of a lot of heads of customer success, as well as customer success managers and staff themselves, there is quite a bit of turnover there, which leads to a lot of discontinuity, and as well as you inevitably have a lot of turnover with sales and sales leadership. Making sure that organizations say, hey, we need to make sure that this alignment continues beyond turnover, and that we get momentum and keep it going even as staff come in and come out. Because you might have one customer success exec who's a very, very big supporter trying to work really hard, but when he or she leaves the organization, a lot of that progress and momentum just evaporates. And really making sure that there's a mechanism by which you keep that going across turnover, as well as onboarding new staff, and as you grow and as you hire new staff without turnover, making sure that everyone is brought up into a culture of collaboration and making sure that things are working well together. So Jason, I think with that as a backdrop, what involvement do you think should CS have in the sales process, and how should they work more collaboratively together?
I think that's a really great question. I want to kind of preface that by saying that, this isn't about a them and us. You have to work together, and there's an absolute pivotal role in success working with sales a lot closer, and vice versa. But it isn't what we're not saying is that the sales model's broken. What we want to say is that they need to work close together. And I think that having the success team work with the salespeople early on, they work there as part of that relationship, is really, really critical. You can help the sales team understand outcomes and our way of thinking about delivering customer outcomes and experiences rather than solutions or consultative selling, but also be involved with the sales guys in trying to learn and discover what the customer's desired outcomes are. And then also the steps that the customers need to go through to get there. How will they achieve that? You hit on a great point earlier on. What we don't want to happen is sales or us as a business committing to an outcome that we can't deliver. So we've got to make sure that we're all aligned there. And I've been in a number of organizations where I've seen a lot of value added in the success guys coming into the sales process nearer the end, so just before signature, but nearer the end of it, not involved from the beginning, but really coming there to help then transfer that journey across as well. So it's not a handover. And I think that's absolutely fundamental. I think you can have the success guys working with the sales team in the sales process to help identify what the actions are that our customers need to take on their side to achieve the outcomes. And it's important to remember we're selling outcomes. We all talk about desired outcomes, the relevant experience, but what you've got to understand is that we're not just selling tech to customers. There's also a big change management piece, and understanding how the customers will get there and what they're going to do and how we can help there is really critical. And I think by having success in there, you're encouraging a longer term relationship. And I think it changes the conversation really importantly. I think the sales guys in every organization I've been in, they do a stellar job. They really do. It really is a tough job to do. And some of the deals they land are incredible. So I think we've got to give them a massive amount of credit for what they do. But they currently, this isn't about blaming sales for relationships not working. Their existing comp plan, as Jason's talked about, and how the organizations have defined roles dictate quite often how they work. So we're trying to change it. And I think a lot of it is kick-started when they start thinking about relationships and we start thinking about relationships. So having the success team as part of the sales process can really help do that and help instill that long-term relationship. And also that the experience matters. It isn't just about we're selling a solution, then letting it go. We're selling an experience, and the experience has to be right for our customer. And if we know that the sales process and the pre-sales part of the journey is at that right level of experience, we can continue that through adoption, implementation, then through to the post-sale side of it. And that absolutely is critical. And I think you've got to really help the sales team focus a lot more on the outcome. And we talked about this last week, I think, Jason, the idea of everyone talks about handovers and making sure that you hand over from sales to success or to implementation, then to success, to support is all done correctly. I think we called it a hand overlap. Don't think of it a handover. It's not someone passing a baton over. What you want to do is be involved in that last sprint where you're working together. So it becomes a lot more of a seamless hand overlap. And I really like the idea of that. Any other thoughts to add?
Yeah, I think, you're right about the hand overlap and going through it, and coming back to the idea, what's the customer looking to buy? And I think you really hit it on the head with, they're not just buying features and functions, but they're really buying that outcome and what they want to get to. And there's always some nervousness and uncertainty on the part of the buyers. So the more you can bring customer success in to say, look, here's the software and the features and functions, and it looks great. This will enable you to achieve those outcomes. Now let me bring in the customer success person so that they can explain how we help you get them and what you need to do in your organization to achieve the outcomes that you want. And I think that both sets the customer success person up for success to be an expert, and it gives the customer themselves some confidence that they will achieve their actual business goals and that they will look good within their organization and have the experience they want to do. So I think there's, through that better alignment and having the customer success person being able to realize that part of what they're selling is the ability of their organization to generate a business outcome, not just to deliver a product, will really help all parties involved.
So the flip side of this then, Jason, is what involvement do you think that the sales team should have with success and any of the other post-sales activities? How can sales get better aligned to the part of the organization that we're in?
I think part of it is some of the sales folks that I've met and have experienced, they're really good at selling. They really love their job, but they want to spend all their time doing what they love and what they're good at and what they're compensated for. But if they would actually spend a little bit more time with the post-sale activities, sitting through some of the implementation efforts, understanding some of the issues, and hearing it even almost as an observer from a customer themselves and through the customer success teams, they'll really start to get a better idea of what happens after the fact that the customers are dealing with and what are some of their challenges, so that they can then figure out, how do we prevent some of these issues, or also how do we set expectations earlier in the sales process that this is what the implementation and adoption process and success process will look like for you. Let's talk about that so that you know how we're going to get you where you need to be. And I think one of the things that we often talk about here is people make their initial buying decision based on hope, but they really make that renewal decision based on experience and what happens after, and what's the reality for them, the reality for how the implementation went, how the adoption effort went, but also what are those outcomes that they get. And having a sales folks to really think about the experience after the sale is complete, or the initial sale, I guess we should say, if it's more that sales chain, really I think would be very helpful. And sort of related to that is getting the salesperson to think about a program of outcomes for the customer, not just the technical solution. And really getting to think software only enables that business outcome, but it's really what happens afterwards within your organization that makes the difference. And having a salesperson include language like that in the sales conversation. Let's talk about how we get you to those outcomes. Let's talk about what you need to do internally that you may not have done before, or don't know how to do, or will need help doing. And here's how we're going to make you successful. And I think only through really spending time in some of those post-sales activities will make a big difference. Actually, quick story, was doing some client work a few years ago and got the, full year-long plus implementation. We got everything live. We did a whole bunch of adoption activities, and the client team, which included some of their sales folks and some of their technical implementation folks, didn't quite understand why we were asking the questions we were, and why we were doing the activities we were to set the client up for success with change management and user adoption and long-term value. And it was only after the fact, when a few months after go live, when we did a large lessons learned exercise, and we interviewed everyone, we got everyone in a room, and we debriefed everything, and they heard firsthand how the client talked about all the challenges they were having getting value. And 95 to 99% of them had nothing to do with the technology, and everything about the way they were trying to get people to use it, how they were trying to communicate and collaborate, how they were managing the adoption effort internally. And it was only through sitting through those afterwards that the sales folks and the technical folks came up to me and said, now I know why you were doing all that. I get it now, and I didn't before, even though you told me. It was only through that experiential piece. So I think that's absolutely key for a lot of folks. I also think what would be really helpful too in the post-sales piece is how is it that sales can help build relationships and help do some better handoffs. I had a training call this morning with another customer, and they were talking about how sales sort of sets them up. Oh, they just do the demos, and that's not what the customer success team does at all. And they were setting false expectations with the client, and they were not setting the customer success team up to really help the client most effectively get value from their purchase. So really helping the sales folks to understand, here's what we do, and here's how I can make this handover more effective, I think is pretty key. Jason, any other thoughts for you?
Yeah, I love the discussion point about demos there, and something I've seen to great effect in a number of organizations is where, when you've got your sales guys doing the pitches, have your customer success team as part of that listening. You want to understand what challenges they come up against, how they work through the challenges, what the answer they've got. So I'd really, really encourage that. I think another key thing I've seen is where you can get, when you've started the alignment working better, is set in place either maybe weekly, fortnightly meetings where your success and your sales teams get together at the end of the week and have a debrief about deals that they've lost, deals that they've won, about churn problems we've had, about customer problems. That really starts building that relationship piece. And I really like your point earlier on, Jason, about the initial buying decision is based on hope, renewals based on experience. What we want to do is really shift that so everybody is involved in delivering that experience. I think that's absolutely critical.
Yep, I agree. So on that note, Jason, let's shift the focus a little bit, and can you share some things of for the people that are out there and having been in this role, what things do you think people should do to actually drive better alignment between sales and customer success? How do we make this happen?
Great question. And I wish there was a silver bullet. That there isn't, but I think there are lots of mini little silver bullets that can absolutely help. You talked earlier on, Jason, about the kind of mind shift change. And I think that is something that is absolutely pivotal. You need to think longer term. Don't just think about this one sale, and really work with your sales team, work with your sales leader, your success leader, to help understand that this is about, our ultimate goal is for this customer to achieve their outcomes with us and renew a year in the future, 2 years in the future. So start thinking longer term. We talk about 5 years in the future, but what do you need to do to make that customer a customer in 5 years' time? It changes if you think over a longer term mindset. and get both sales and success both to understand that it's a combination of relationship, it's a combination of the customer journey, the experience, and the outcomes that we're delivering, all of those outcomes over that 5 years are really key. And the key thing is to try and work together to map where on your sales journey, where on the success, the implementation journey, where that sits in the whole customer journey, but where do both teams see it breaking down? Where are problems occurring? I think be open and honest with each other there. I think one key thing as well is how do you work to identify what the behaviors are that are required in all the different parts of your business to help achieve and drive this level of engagement and achievement. And it's really difficult sometimes. I think it's important to understand all of your colleagues' roles, responsibilities, what it is they're delivering, what's the remit that they're meant to be doing. It's important that when you look at new hires, hire for people that are about relationships. And I think we're seeing a big growth in the number of subscription professional salespeople. We all know about the customer success manager role and how that's booming, but people are starting to think about relationships. So hire for that relationship, that trust, and the collaboration. One of the bigger challenges quite often is how do you get your C-level to work to these new behaviors? But I think we're beginning to see that. And on the webinar that we did on customer centricity, I'm a big believer in the role of a chief customer officer or somebody at the exec level that is ultimately responsible for helping break down those internal barriers, those silos, and building those relationships. No one person in the organization owns the relationship, but somebody can help spearhead it and tactically look at what they can do. Getting, it has to be a top-down thing.
I agree. I think we're seeing more of that in newer companies and earlier stage startups where they have an expectation from the very beginning that this is our business model. I still see quite a few challenges there for folks that are from an older mindset or older, on-prem traditional sale model to make that shift where they may instinctively understand it, but they are not prepared to take the actions. And we've worked with a couple of organizations where, the C-levels would give some lip service to them and do a little bit of stuff and would nod their head, but then ultimately they weren't committed to take the action necessary because I think there was still a perception that it wasn't critical and essential yet, that they were still doing fine the way they were. And, I think the writing was on the wall that you're fine for now, but you won't be 5 years from now if you don't make some of these transitions. So I think that's still a painful area that hasn't quite reached its peak yet.
I think you're so right there. And I think what I think one key thing that's really important to do is absolutely share feedback across the business, sales feedback, win-loss analysis, what happened on deals, why we won them, why we lost them, but share it. But then also why do we lose customers? So do the same thing at the other side of the journey. When customers leave us, share that. What are customers saying about us that isn't as great? And I like the idea of customer feedback wall within a business where we can share throughout the whole business so it's fully democratized. Everybody can see what customers are saying. And I think that kind of kickstarts that whole collaboration. I think that's really important to do. I think the other thing that we talked about, Jace, was looking at the different compensation models, not just for sales, but also for customer success. And how do you align the model so that we're rewarding long-term behavior? Look at sales selling on the basis of outcomes, not just feature and functions. And also look at sales to sell. A part of what they're selling is customer success. So how do they get rewarded for that? How do customer success reward for it? We're not necessarily charging for it. A lot of organizations don't charge for customer success, but we should still pitch it. It's a fundamental thing and absolutely a big differentiator for us. When it's done right, we can deliver those long-term outcomes. I think something it's sorry, Jace, go on.
I was just going to say too, I think, right now, as many organizations are all still trying to figure out what customer success is, many of the customers, they're inundated, they have so many software vendors and they have different flavors of customer success that they're experiencing. Over time, they're going to become a more savvy buyer and being able to understand which customer success services that they need to actually achieve success with any given software, and it will factor into their buying decision. So I think those sales teams now that can position customer success and explain the value and demonstrate this is how we help you achieve those business outcomes, they're going to have a leg up, in probably even just in the next 3 to 5 years. Absolutely.
I think a couple of other points that you can look at tactically what you can do. I'm a big believer in customer success having an input into vetoing deals that they believe won't be successful with a customer post-sale. Not necessarily where it's not an ideal fit customer, but where if success are involved in the sales function, we're part of the sign-off. Is it a deal that we want to go through? But make people understand that. So start talking about the idea of success, having the authority to veto deals that are not going to be successful, where we all agree they're not going to be successful. And this isn't just customer success saying they're not going to be successful. We've got an exec team within the business that say, we've agreed this business isn't a good fit. We don't need to do this sale, but have the authority to veto it.
Just one of the things related to that, I've posed with a couple of customer success professionals and to a couple of clients, just the question, what would it look like if instead of customer success reporting up to sales in your organization, if sales reported up to customer success? And if the mindset was really around how do we reward that long-term, renewal chain all the way through? And I think just sort of flipping that question around starts to say, it would be a very different relationship then.
It's great that, because I think we will see over time leadership. We've already seen a transition to more customer-centric leadership. I think that's going to continue. I've seen different organizations where success reports into sales, vice versa. I've seen sales and success report into one person, but that one person has to be more customer-centric. And you're so right that we're beginning to see that. I think the other key thing is we talked earlier on about the handover or hand overlap, but it's fundamental that is done. It's done well, it's documented, and it's signed off. So it isn't just about sales to success, but also sales to implementation, adoption, professional services. It's success then to support. That handover is critical. I want my sales teams to have documented what the outcomes are and how our customers are going to achieve those. That comes across to success, implementation. We document those as well. We've signed them off. But that handover is so critical. I'd even encourage having your sales guys sit in on the first implementation call. It doesn't need to be a big ask, and I know our sales guys are under huge pressure to deliver and work on new deals, but it gives you far more seamless handover when the salesperson that you've been involved with is on that same call. He knows what's going on. He or she knows what's going on in those conversations. That could really be a game changer as well. And I think that the final thing I'd add in here is really keep working on team alignment. I said earlier on, have sales and success work together on a joint meeting. Have sales join success meetings, vice versa. Your sales leadership and success leadership objectives, make sure the leaders' objectives are aligned and both in sync with each other. What you don't want is a very aggressive sales targets that you cannot deliver because of different success objectives. But you need, and have the sales team understanding what the success team's objectives are as well. I think that is really critical. Have sales involved, talk to them and what their involvement can be with the renewal. What help do we need from them? If we're talking about them getting commission on the renewal, they've got an interest in it. What involvement do we need from them? When do we want them in there? It isn't just a signature. We want them to come in and do the necessary negotiations, but involve them in it in the run up to the final renewal. Get both teams to share wins and losses. I think that is really critical. Wins and losses on the sales side, but also churn. When we have churn, why have we had it? Understand that. What worked well? What hasn't worked well? And what are the really key learnings that we can have from each other? And the last point I'd say is, the sales team do a demo of our products that really gets our customers really excited. They get this. It's solving a problem for them. It's delivering some outcomes. To then have a success team come in and say, this success, the software only enables the outcome. Let's talk about how you achieve it. We want to change that, and we want everybody aligned so that people are really excited from that demo. Success come in, then talk about the outcomes, but talk about the changes that they need in their organizations as well. And I think having that involvement there in the two is really critical and can really reap rewards for you. Any other things you add, Jason?
No, I think you covered a pretty good list there.
I think that's the list of questions that we had. We've got 8 or 9 questions that we had beforehand, and there've been a good couple that have come in 5 from the audience. What we'll do now is we'll tackle them one by one. We'll go through the ones that we had to start with, and subject to time, we'll then go through the ones that we've had at the end. So, Jace, I'll push one back to you. One that's come in What would you do if your sales team is completely quota oriented instead of success and customer oriented?
Yeah, that's one you see quite a bit. I think the first part there, obviously, is start to really look at the comp plans and how you can change those as a way to drive different behavior. But even as part of that, I think you've really got to get in and speak to the executives who have set up this mindset and this culture to say, is this really what we want? Is this going to achieve our business goals for renewals and expansions? And here are some of the problems that we have. And start to have that conversation first to get the executive support that you need. Then I think you start to change the comp plan. But one of the things I think is so often missed is that many organizations forget to ask for the specific behaviors that they want. So if, when you talk about if they're quota oriented instead of success oriented, what does that mean? What are the observable actions and behaviors you can point to that are harming your organization? Say, we would like them to please stop doing X, Y, and Z. Instead, please do A, B, and C so that we get this other result. And similarly, what else do we need to do to enable those desired behaviors? And then, the other piece is, the single biggest driver of performance and behavior is sort of the immediate supervisor. So making sure that the sales managers are rewarding and incentivizing and acknowledging the correct behaviors and desired behaviors is pretty key. And it's not an easy thing to do, and I think that's one of those situations that if you are the customer success person or customer success leader, you really do need to start at the sales leadership and start to get them to understand the impact that it's having on the rest of the organization. And many organizations get so excited about the revenue coming in the door that they forget cost to serve and churn and the other pieces and the impact that has on profitability. So you're looking at both sides of the profitability equation, I think is pretty key. Any thoughts there, Jason?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think it's actually something that's quite difficult to do. I think you've hit the nail on the head. The comp plan is something to look at. The renewal outcomes comp plan. We're not discounting that can be very difficult. You're looking to change behavior, change how your sales guys are incentivized. But it goes back to that thinking long term. I really like the idea. If my sales team can be rewarded partly on the initial transaction, partly on delivery of outcomes, and partly on renewal, and then that renewal, they're rewarded on it year after year, that's a really compelling proposition for them. So I think that's something to bear in mind and help that conversation. It's not, comp plans aren't something often that would change overnight.
Yeah, agreed. So another question that we had, Jason, for you is, what do you recommend for joint KPIs with sales?
It's a great question, that, and one that I've worked in with many different organizations looking at how we do it. I think churn is an important one, whether it's a revenue churn or customer number churn. I want my sales guys to know customers that are going out and why they're going out. So not just the numbers, but why they're leaving. So I think that's a very important joint KPI. And on the other side, renewal percentages. If we do things right, I want everyone to know how often and how frequently people are renewing. Also, what upsell is being done, what cross-sell. So how does the expansion look like with the accounts or the customers? That's really critical. I think something that we talked about was having a customer rate or score the likelihood of how they've achieved or how they have achieved their business outcomes at the QBR. So at the first QBR we do, and subsequent QBRs, how well have we achieved the business outcomes? And that goes back to the original sale. If the sales guys understand what it is we're selling and what the outcomes are, it can really fit nicely there. So I really like that. I think a really other good one that we talked about yesterday, Jason, we had a lot of debate about NPS. And in the end decided not NPS wouldn't be a joint one, but it was if you ask a customer to rate at any point, how likely are you to renew? So the question is, if you had to renew today, would you? And get everybody, sales, success, every other one of the organization, ask that as part of your interactions. And I think that absolutely is a joint KPI that everybody should share. I think it really shows you're not just that someone would recommend you, but actually based on how things are today, you would renew. We've delivered sufficiently to renew. So I think that one's really powerful.
I think that one's great. And I think if during the sales process and during the transition process to implementation, setting the expectation with the client that, look, we are so focused on you getting the expected business outcomes and the value that you need that you will want to renew with us for 20 years. And to help us gauge where we're doing along that continuum, we're going to ask you in every interaction, have we created enough value that you would renew today? And not just the sales process or the tool, but the end-to-end experience. Are they confident that they're getting the outcomes that they want that would justify this? And that really, I think, is a great way to say, are we being successful today? And if we're not, well, then clearly we've got to turn something around. And I think customers would probably be uncomfortable with that or not used to it at first, but then as you do it and they get used to the magic question at the end of every meeting, and even start off with the meeting, I mean, at the end of this, we're going to ask you this. I think they'll get used to it, and it'll be a really great way to help get tighter with your customers too.
Great point. So I think these are just some of the KPIs that we've thought through. I think there are lots of other ones. We'd love to hear your feedback, what ones you've used. I think one question, Jason, that someone else asked, which is one that comes up time and time again, and I know there are lots of potentially emotive debates about this. Who should handle the renewal?
Yeah, that one does come up all the time, and I think the answer is going to be it depends on your organization, how you're structured. But I think generally speaking, I would prefer sales or account executives or a renewal team to do the actual renewal. Someone other than the customer success team, but keeping in mind that the journey up to the renewal in that previous 12 months, everyone should own that, and customer success should be there guiding the way. And part of the reason I suggest that is so many times the customer success needs to be seen as a business advisor, as a trusted advisor, and the customer has to have confidence that they're not just going to push product or push upsells if they don't think it can genuinely help the customer's business. And actually having that discussion right up front, like, hey, I'm a customer success person. I'm not in charge of renewals. I'm not compensated by expansion. I am compensated based on you achieving your business outcomes. So everything I do is focused in those interests, and our interests are now aligned. I think that goes a long way to establish the trust and credibility that CS people need in order to be able to work effectively with clients and to get the clients to listen to them and engage with them appropriately. So, Jason, one for you. I would like to know when you recommend that the CSM is introduced to a new or potential customer, and what are the risks?
Great, another great question. And I think we talked about earlier on getting success involved in the sales cycle. So I would always say, particularly for your larger deals, if you're dealing with enterprise customers, bring them in towards the end of the sales cycle, maybe at 75, 80% commitment. So before signature, but not at that, they're not there performing a pre-sales role. They're there to help formalize the relationship side of it, make sure that things are set up for success. So I'd always say bring them in, if subject to resourcing, of course, the practical side of that, but bring them in towards the end of the sales cycle. So when there's a kind of a 75, 80% commitment, I think that's a good point to bring them in. I think you could look, as I said, at success being involved in every single sale, that there is a resource problem that could generate, but have a look at your segments. You may make a decision that according to the custom segments you've got set up, that you want success involved in your higher tier segments and not your lower tier ones. It may be some mix in the middle. You may bring different levels of success people in at the top end and not so at the bottom end. But I think always bear it in mind. And I think what I'd always see the success team as being is they're there to help close the deal. They're not there to kind of initiate that sales transaction. They're there as the closer to give the customer the confidence that we're, as a business, not just success, but as a business, we're going to deliver their outcomes, and that there's someone that's going to help look after that. Someone's going to be responsible for that, but it helps maintain that relationship. On the point, what are the risks? I think there are no risks other than resourcing. I really do think if you've trained your success guys up at the correct way, your sales team are selling on outcomes. What you don't want to do, so is there a risk that your success person could come in, potentially discredit what your sales guys have said? They won't deliver this. That could happen, but if you work beforehand to make sure everyone's aligned there, you can minimize the risk of that. So I think the biggest risk is around the resourcing side of it.
Right, and we've done some trainings where we've had salespeople in the room with the customer success team, and there was a real hesitation on the part of the sales folks to have customer success in, because they were afraid that they would say or do anything that would slow down a sale or would position it incorrectly. And I think that's such a dangerous mindset, that overcoming that and say, look, customer success may actually help you close it. And they may help it close faster by giving the customer some additional confidence as well. But that also comes back to as a salesperson, you've done a proper job of setting the customer up and having the discussions on business outcomes and the value that you will create, then that shouldn't be a risk at all.
I think that's a great point. It goes back to that mind shift change, doesn't it? It goes back to making people think differently. You know, we're bringing success in to help close the deal, that they're not there as blockers. You want them to close the deal. And I think that goes back to showing the level of relationship you've got there with the different teams. One back for you, Jason. Looking at for what the ways to add and show more value from customer success earlier in the sales process would be, perhaps at the project kickoff.
I think even early in the sales process, probably even before the project kickoff, getting the customer success team involved earlier and really helping them pitch the value of customer success and explain the services that they bring. Because a lot of customers still don't fully know what customer success is, or they've seen so many different versions of it from different vendors, they don't really have accurate expectations around what happens. And I think, part of the discussion is, the product can enable your outcomes, and here's how us as a customer success can help you get there and close that loop. One of the things that I've done that's been really effective, and I've got a blog about it with some videos where I just map out the success curve and what actually happens and what happens before go live, and what happens 3, 5, 10 years down the road after go live, where all that value is created or lost, and trying to have discussions with prospective customers of, let's talk about what happens, the first year after go live, 2 years, 3 years after go live, within your organization after the system's up and running, and where have you encountered risks, where have you historically not gotten the adoption of the value that you wanted. And you can look at any system, and what you'll probably find is that most customers do not have the capacity, the infrastructure, or just the core competencies to really drive adoption and value creation from technology. They can usually get it live, but then they struggle. Mapping out some of the issues there, identifying some of the risks to their investment, and then showing how you as a CS team act to help mitigate those risks can be very, very powerful. And if you can do it with authority and announce the confidence on how you get people there, many times that will get them very excited to do it. And we'll also have them take a look at their critically about how they actually implement their technology, and what are some of the things that they may want to change in their process or methodology that they've done for years that haven't really worked for them. And I think the more that you can show that expertise and adoption and value creation as a customer success team, the better off you are. And just a word of caution, if you go that route though, if it's during the sales process, you want to explain some of the issues and the way in which you help the customer address those, but don't invest the time and effort actually doing the work to map all that out until they've actually signed, or unless they hire you as a pre-sales strategy engagement on how you would go ahead and do this. Because many times, if there's other reasons that factor into their buying decision, you'll get the confidence there, but you don't want to deliver free work for them. That's very important too. Any thoughts on that?
I think that, I really like the idea of kind of a project kickoff with everybody involved. I think it's such a compelling message for the customer that as a business, we are all aligned and we're here to deliver the outcomes that the customers agree to or want. And I think that is such a critical thing. And I think you've hit on a key point there. It's how do you get customers to understand what customer success is? To a lot of customers, it's foreign. They've never heard of it before. It's an alien concept, but it's a really powerful one. And having your sales team understand what that is and how to pitch it can really, really add a lot of value.
Yeah. And I think, one thought around that, I've worked on a lot of projects over the years, and many of the project kickoffs I've been a part of and have sat through have been kind of painful. And they've been a lot around, here are the milestones, here's the project plan, here are the work teams. And they skip over the business outcomes. They skip over what happens in that year or two after go live. And most people view go live as the end of the project, when really that's where the heavy work starts. And I think for customer success to help organize something like this, especially early when the sale is closed, you really need to look at what is that kickoff process, and what's the content and the expectation and actions coming out of that. And that is really your first effort to start to shift mindset from go live is not success. It's what happens 1, 3, 5 years down the road. So Jason, another question for you. What should we do if we have a bad fit client that we're closed only to really beat our sales numbers? So we've got this client, they're not the ideal fit. Sales guy had to hit our numbers, and for whatever reason, we move forward with it. What do we do?
Thank you for letting me take that question, Jason. That's a great one as well. When we were talking about this the other day, I mean, I think I've not worked for an organization that you don't have some customers that don't fit. And I think particularly with startups, there's always going to be the push from investors, from the founders of the business about growth. And at the beginning, if we're honest, we're not actually sure what our ideal customers are probably. So I think you're always going to get that challenge. So if you've got bad fit customers, don't think you're in isolation. I think everybody's got, and when I say bad fit, put brackets around it, inverted commas. You've got some customers that don't meet your ideal customer profile. But I think what you don't want to have happen is your success team coming back and telling the business or sales that we need to lose those customers since they don't fit. I don't think that's the right way to do it. What you need to do is get your success team to identify what the problem is that these customers are causing for us, and how do we articulate back to our sales team and our exec team the business impact that it's having, and then start that conversation with sales, with CS, with the exec team about what do we need to do. And one of those outcomes may be that we need to churn the customers. Maybe we need to talk about exit. It might be that we need to adjust something, or it might be that something is fundamentally wrong, that we need to change the product. So you need to have those internal conversations. I think, how do we stop bad fit customers? And again, bad fit with inverted quotes around it. Get your success team and your sales team and marketing to talk about what your good fit customers look like. And I'd never encourage to have a single one good fit customer, but have a range, from okay fit to great fit. So what does that range look like? What's the scope of those, and how do we target those better? And if we've got bad fit customers, the impact on our business, the cost to serve is very high, a lot higher than it should be. And ultimately that impacts our profitability, our margins. There's an impact on quality of service. It can have a negative impact on our reputation externally with other customers when our sales guys are selling. They may be generating revenue, but not as much as other customers. But I think one of the other things is some bad fit customers might be there because they're a strategic logo that we've made a decision to keep. So you've got to understand what the problem is that they're causing and how they got to that situation. And I think if we do make a decision to exit a customer, for them to exit the organization, do it in the right way. Have the conversations internally to get agreement on how you're going to do it. You may not be able to exit them. You may need to go to your contracts, look at that. That I'd always see as a worst case. But I think fundamentally it's trying to understand what's the impact that the customer's having on us by us perceiving them as bad fit. What can we do to address any of that? And do we have to shift anything in what our perception of an ideal customer is? I don't know if there's anything further you'd add there, Jason.
No, I think you really covered it. I mean, it's never the ideal situation. You get them there. But one of the things we did talk about is, over time, many organizations will have sunset certain versions of their product or entire products altogether, and will no longer support some of these. Sometimes that is the right discussion to have a proactive discussion out with your customer to advise them and say, here's the direction we're going. And if it's not a fit with your business, how do we do this with enough notice in a transition period to get you off successfully, such that you would still refer others to us, and that you were so satisfied with this relationship that you might come back in the future if your needs change or if our product changes.
That I think is such a key thing, and it's part of your churn process as well. Is you want to maintain that relationship. Don't burn bridges. If we can identify what the issues are, what the outcomes are not being delivered, and we can fix it in the future, the customers could well come back.
Oh, and a lot of times the employees of one company today have moved on somewhere else. And
absolutely, it's a small world.
It's an incredibly small world.
We are coming up on time, so we'll try to get through these last few quite quickly. A question back for you, Jason. I think this has come up in a number of the real Q&A or the real time ones that people have put in. How would you transition a sales team without any customer success organization to be more customer centric, or even a sales team that you don't think is as customer centric as they could be? How would you transition them to help them be more customer centric?
That is a great question. There's still a lot of organizations that don't have a formal customer success team or those roles yet. And I think it comes back to applying a lot of organization development techniques and organizational transition techniques to really start with what is what are the behaviors or the actions that we're seeing right now that are not working for us, that we need to get changed? Why do we need to make this transition? And start to help, at the executive levels and from above, create some visioning around what needs to happen and where we need to go. And obviously there's the compensation piece, but then start to break down what are some specific behaviors that we want to see differently. What are the actions we need people to start? And then you can even get into, I've seen organizations do very tactical things such as change their sales approval process internally. So for example, you might have something before we sign off on a deal internally, and for a sales rep to get their commission, they need to have thought through and documented up what is a 5-year renewal plan for this customer. What are the things that will make them, and the selling points that will make them want to renew in year 2, year 3, year 4? What are the milestones the customer needs to hit in terms of value that would get them to renew? And use that as a vehicle by which you start to shift the mindset of that salesperson. So those are some very tactical things you can do. I think there's also, some ongoing development and training around customer success, around the subscription business model, and really some ongoing coaching and feedback around, you're setting yourself up for a nice, quarter in closing this deal, but you're going to lose everything down the road, or this customer is going to churn, or it doesn't meet our other expectations. And we need to adjust that. So let's talk about how we do that and the techniques. And then similarly, I think over the longer term is really look at your hiring profile, and are you bringing in the people that have that mentality and have that experience from the very beginning that they can bring into the organization, especially as you mature and grow. Is, some folks, if the organization is evolving and their market and their customers are evolving, some folks may not want to make that shift, and it will be very difficult if you keep some folks there if they do not want to transition, and trying to figure out what that needs to look like. So how do you hire folks that be a more natural fit going forward? So I think those are pretty key, and also get them to start to look at some of the feedback with the product and with customer support, and seeing some of the impact that the challenges the customers are having, and challenge them and say, how can we sell differently to prevent some of these problems? What things could you do differently on the front end that would make it more profitable on the back end? There's some organizations that have had those discussions, and they challenge every single department to come up with a list of specific things that they would change or they could do to help make sure that they're selling to the right customers that are going to be profitable and where they need to go. And once people understood the need and the goal, and then they were challenged with this, then they could come up with some ideas, some really great ideas that no one else had ever thought of. So that's also another way you can go. And then obviously, I think there's the rewarding the people who make that transition and showcasing their success. Jason, do you have other thoughts around that?
I really like the point about the feedback, and I think that's something that I want my sales team to do, is to understand what the customers, a month, 2 months down the line, what are customers saying about the process, and share that with the sales team. And I think that's really important, so they can understand how successful their sales processes are. They can refine that. But that also has to work with the product team. It isn't just sales in isolation. So I think involving your sales team in the feedback from your customers, and even looking at kind of case studies, advocacy, how can your sales team help with doing that as well?
Yep, agreed. All right, I think this is going to have to be our last question for you, Jason, just in the interest of time.
Yeah.
What best practices do you have regarding the approach for co-ownership of customer engagement strategy between sales and customer success?
Do you know what, when I saw this question first, it kind of a lights lit up. I really like it, because this is, I think there's a lot of organizations that still have silos where they're talking about who owns the customer. Clearly here we're talking about co-ownership, which is really, really nice. So that's the first thing. I'd really reinforce that, break away from anybody talking about who owns the customer, who owns different customer strategies. As I said, it reinforces them. And I think you find that many companies have, as a result of that, very disjointed customer engagement, customer experience strategies and approaches. I'd really, how you can improve this and focus on it, really look at what data you have. What data do you have from the sales point of view? What commercial information? And what customer data? Look at adoption, usage, reporting, value insights, outcome insights. How do you present them together and share them in a dashboard that both sales and success can see and understand the engagement, how it's working? Involve both teams in mapping out the customer journey, and look at it as the journey starts from the pre-sales point of view. So it starts from those initial leads, engagements with marketing, right through to how the customers are using the product, to people churning or renewing, but involve both teams in that. And I think having a joint working through that program there will really help. And I think a number of the strategies that we've talked about above can really help, by having a jointly owned, everybody bought into, signed off the engagement strategy, the experience strategy, can really help continue to build that cross-team, cross-business approach there where we're working collaboratively. So I really continue the work you've done there, collaborating, work with different teams, work with different team meetings. How do you understand what the different good points, the bad points are from the different strategies? Anything you'd add on that, Jason?
No, I think you hit it all. So just as a way to wind down, folks, also wanted to put out, again, our question at the top of the webinar was, what bold single action will you take to power up your alignment in your organization? So if you have some thoughts, would love if you could type them into the chat window, and we'll see what people think. We probably won't have time to discuss them today, but would love to capture them and maybe share some ideas with others. So we hope this has been helpful. Also, a quick announcement before we close out. We do have our next webinar topic on getting customer onboarding and adoption right, and that'll be on February 12th, 2019 at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We hope you can join us for that. Really think that will be a fun discussion. I'm very passionate about user adoption and excited to have it. So with that said, Jason, you want to just give yourself a little wrap up?
Yeah, I will do. So guys, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having us. Fantastic to start 2019 off. We had a record number of people registering and a record number of people listening in. So big thank you from me. I hope you've all got something out of it. What we will try and do is, there are still 5 or 6 questions answered or to be answered. We'll see if we can still answer those and come back. But I would love, please do reach out to me. I'm UK based, clearly, kind of the experience on the global side of it over in Europe and beyond. But do reach out to me if there's any mentoring, consulting or coaching I can do. I'm on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Please link up. I would love further conversations with anybody.
Great, thank you. And same for me as well too. Based in Washington, D.C. We have a variety of training and consulting and coaching services that we provide, as well as some online training. Would love to share information and hear what you're doing and how we can help. And also just wanted to let you guys know as well, we are trying to be more active on YouTube this year, so we will have this replay out there, as well as a lot of other videos coming in the year ahead. So if you have not done so, please go out to our YouTube channel and click the subscribe button. And we're also going to be posting this webinar, and the other webinars are already out there. But also we may look into breaking some of these up into shorter clips as well too, for folks who just want to have a conversation on a small topic. They can share it with others. So please go ahead and check that out when you get a chance to. tritons.co/YouTube. Great. Thank you all so much. We hope this has been helpful, and we look forward to you joining us on another episode of the Jason's Take On. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.